All right, so now that we've reached step 3, we are moving onwards and upwards. And we're going to add a little bit more functionality to our Hangman game so that it functions more and more like a real game. So in this particular step, we're going to add the ability for the user to continue guessing again and again, repeating the Hangman checks until they get all the letters in the word. So if you go ahead and right click on solution.py and then run that solution, we can see what the end result of this step will look like. So we have the chosen word, we have the number of characters in that word, and then we are asked to guess a letter. So if I start from the beginning and I guess C, now what we want to happen is this. We're getting another opportunity to guess. And we want this to repeat by writing a while loop in our code. So that's to do number 1. Now, the next thing we want to do is to update this for loop here so that if we guess a previous correct letter, such as the C in this case, when we guess another letter correctly, we want to keep the previous correct guess and the new letter and add all of that to our variable called display. Now, in contrast, let's take a look what happens at the moment if we use our current state of our code in main.py. So if I guess A and all the A's in aardvark gets filled in, the next time that I guess this word, my previous ones will be lost because I'm again checking against the current guess. So think about how you might solve that. And if you get stuck, there's always hints in the description box for you. But there is quite a bit of thinking and quite a bit of struggling in this particular program that you're writing. But as always, it's really good when you struggle because that means you're learning something. If you're not struggling at all, then this part is probably too easy for you and you need to skip ahead quite a few days. But if you are struggling, then that means you are at the right stage in your programming journey and you will eventually get to where you want to be. So I'm going to go quiet now and let you have time to think. So pause the video, read the description, try out the solution, run, and see if you can figure out these 2 to-dos in step 3. All right, let's go through the solution. Now, if you haven't attempted to solve this, I recommend to stop and don't watch the solution just yet. It's only worth watching the solution if you've actually tried, at least for 10-20 minutes, because otherwise the solution is just going to be somebody reading to you a bunch of code and you won't do any learning. And I'm really, really against this idea of spoon-fed education where we're just told what the answer is, because without the thinking phase, we're not truly learning. We're just repeating somebody else's thought. And the most important thing to learn is how to think. That's what a really valuable programmer's skill is. Okay, so I believe you. You've already tried it. Now let's see if we can go through the solution. So the first step is to use a while loop to let the user guess again, because at the moment, once they make this one guess, then everything continues and we are at the end of the script. Now, how do we make them guess again? Well, we would need a while loop. So while some condition is true or while some condition is false, then we want to continue running a block of code. And then when that condition switches, we skip out of the loop and we continue in our code. So what is going to be that condition? Well, we can have a condition called game over, and we can set that to false. Now we can check for that condition. We can say while not game over, so while game over is false, we want the user to make some guesses. We want to update this display, And we also want to do the rest of the code because we need to check through the letter of their guess and see if we can update the display, etc., etc. So all of the rest of the code actually go into the while loop, and by go in, if you remember, it means that they get indented one step so that they're inside this while heading. Now, when do we actually change the while loop so that they can come out of it? Well, if we have these blanks in our display to represent the unguessed letters, if all the unguessed letters are guessed and there are no more underscores, well then at that point, that's when our game is over, right? So let's add an if statement and check if display, and there's a really useful function in Python which is called in. And what we can do with in is we can check to see if something exists in something else. So we can say if this underscore is not in our display variable, so this string does not contain any of these underscores, well, at that point, they've guessed everything because there's no more blanks. They've guessed all the letters. Then at this point, we can print you win. And that's also the right time point when we can change our game over so that we set it to true because they've won, therefore game is over. Now we're going to define other conditions for game over later on, but for now, at least we have one place where our code can exit the while loop, which is really, really important when you're writing while loops, because otherwise you get into this infinite loop situation and that's not good. So let's test our first to do and see if it does what we expect it to do. So aardvark, let's guess the letter A. A gets filled in and then it's asking us guess another letter, right? So let's keep typing because we know what the word is. But now we encounter another issue because notice how the R is being placed into our display variable and the rest of them are filled in with blanks. But our previous guess, the A, has disappeared from the display variable and it's replaced by blanks. So in this particular situation, we'll never get to the state where there are no more underscores in the display because each time this while loop runs, we're only ever checking one letter, which is the current guessed letter. So to fix that, we have to go into to do number 2 and change the for loop so that we can keep the previous correct letters in the display string. So how do we do this? There's many ways of doing this, and one way of doing this is simply by creating a list. Now notice I'm going outside the while loop to create this list because I want this list to accumulate while the loop runs so that each time it's not being wiped blank. So if I create a new list here, which is called correct letters, and set it to a blank or a empty list like so, if this was placed inside the while loop, then every time the loop repeats, that list is going to be wiped to 0 because of this part here in this line. So instead, we want it to be outside the while loop. And now what we're going to do is if the letter that we're looping in through the word is matching the guessed letter by the user, then not only do we add that letter to the display, but we also add that letter to our list of correct letters. So correct letters dot append, and we're going to append this current letter that we're looping through. You can also append the guess, but at this point they are exactly equal, so it doesn't really matter which one you choose. It just depends on which you think is more readable. Now, if we rerun this code, it doesn't really change much, right? If I change a letter, it's still not doing what I want. So what I have to do also is probably add another check. So I'm going to check another condition using an elif. So if the current guess matches the letter that we're currently looping on, then we add the letter to the display. And if it doesn't match, then we add an underscore. But there's another condition we need to check. We need to check elif, the current letter that we're looping in, is in the list of correct letters. Because remember, if on a previous run of the while loop, a letter was guessed to be correct, then it gets added to this list of correct letters. And so now, whenever we check our letters and we want to fill in the other letters in the display, we need to make an elif. So in this case, what are we going to do? We're going to add the current letter to the display. So similar to this line here. So now if we rerun this code and we add a letter, so now B has been added to the display. Let's try N. So you can see now B is added, but N is also added. So the flow goes like this. The 4-letter in chosen word, the first one that gets turned into a letter is B. So we're checking, is B equal to the guess at this point? Yes. So then we add B to the display and we add blanks to the rest of it. Now then the correct letter is added to this list. So B now lives inside this list. And notice it's outside the while loop, so it doesn't get modified when the while loop repeats from the top of the block of code. So the next time this runs, we're guessing a different letter. We're guessing N. So when N is true, then we are adding N to our display. But when something else is not, one of the letters that we're looping in is not matching guess, for example, B, but it is in fact inside the list of correct letters, then that letter also gets added to the display. And this might be something that you want to try and run in Thonny if it is confusing. But if it all makes sense, then feel free to continue to the next step in the game.
Thanks for watching the video till the end. Please leave your thoughts below so we can discuss more about the topic. If you'd like to suggest a video that could help the community, feel free to message me on X or Instagram. We also share short videos on Instagram, so make sure to follow us there. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and might even create a video based on your suggestion. Thanks again for being part of our community. See you in the next video.